what I want to talk about, Thomas, and now that we've gotten going here a little bit, you talked at the very end the other day about head coaches on Monday's show and what head coaches are worth, right? And again, we don't want to dehumanize this. Like, we know that there are humans involved in here, but I do think that there's a really cool question about if you do get an elite head coach or an elite head coach exists. So let's just throw a name out there. Sean Payton, right? Former New Orleans Saints coach, turned a franchise around, won a Super Bowl, had a second stint as well. Kind of your nemesis as well. You being a Falcon, him being a Saint. I want to get down to the idea of like, okay, if this guy is semi-available, how much would you as a general manager trade for a coach of that of the elite caliber, the Hall of Fame caliber guy? What would be the right price? And I think I have a decent answer, but I want to see us kind of iterate on this, both from a qualitative and somebody who's been there before. You hired Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn helped you take the Falcons to a Super Bowl. Clearly a good hire. I've never hired a coach before, but I've helped people hire coaches. What would you like? Just ballpark. What would you think like a decent starting point for a price would be?
I think when you're talking about the top 2 or 3 in the league, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Let's say and I don't mean, there's a lot of good coaches in the league, but let's think about like Shanahan. Let's think about obviously Belichick,
Sean McVay.
Even like, I'm going to be honest with you. I even put Nick Sirianni to a certain extent in that category. I think he's more in that LaFleur tier where that's a very good coach. I'm not going to give him his gold jacket yet, but like guys like that, where I'm like, that guy's done a pretty damn good job of elevating a franchise. So like, kind of let's think about maybe a step above the LaFleurs and Siriannis. But maybe not necessarily like Belichick. He's a little older, but like kind of that quality of coach. Like, what would we have to pay for, to get this person into the building?
Look, I think those are 2 first rounders plus. And I mean, it's interesting you say that because this was presented to me, when again, and I've said this time and again, I really loved, and he was a 3-time coach of the year, Mike Smith. And I think Dan Quinn is a damn good coach, and he should get another shot at it. When we were going through what we were going through the last, year and a little bit, and after when I started thinking, okay, maybe Arthur Blank is going to keep me around and I'm going to be able to revisit the idea of bringing in a 3rd head coach, didn't know which direction we were going to go, of course. I had started thinking more than ever after going through 2 coaches who were really good, but we didn't accomplish, unfortunately, what we wanted, which was not just the coaching. It was me. It was all of us. I was so much more open-minded to think, hey, let's talk about getting the top coach in the league, in an organization, and let's see how much it's truly worth. Because you can go round and round in our league, Eric, and GMs will argue it's the quarterback. GMs will argue it's the coach. That whole banter, the whole, especially when you're talking about what was going on in New England with Bill and Tom. Remember, I think I told you before, I don't know if it was on this pod, but when I had Jason Light on my travel around my GM journey pod, he literally said, though he thinks it was a huge sort of like killer move that he brought in Tom Brady, his biggest air quote baller move was bringing in the head coach. Think about that comment. That is a strong comment from a person who has a really strong belief in the league. And whether you like Jason and what he's done or not, he was a Super Bowl champion. And he said in the very end, it was more about Bruce Arians at that time, not minimizing Tom Brady. That's a big question. So to bring this back around very quickly, when you're a GM and you're searching over years and years, especially when you get into double digits, as much as you like the coaches you've had, you start thinking big picture and you're like, would I give away 2 first-round picks for Sean Payton, McVay, whoever else is deemed as it? And you do think a lot more about that, believe me.
Yeah, well, and I like Todd Bowles. I certainly think that he's a good football coach, and especially as a defensive coordinator, his game plan against Kansas City in the 2020 Super Bowl is legendary. But given how Tampa Bay has done this year without Bruce Arians at the helm, you could make that argument. Like, there's a good argument to make because Brady is a constant there. He's gotten older, right? And we know how age curves go, even for somebody like Brady. But, going from Arians to Bowles was considered a lateral move in the offseason, and it's been anything but as far as the results have been concerned. And so maybe that's a little bit in Light's, repertoire, a positive data point there. Bowles, again, like I said, I think Bowles has, he got the short end of the stick in New York. But, so far, like, this is a good roster and they're struggling a little bit. So maybe there was a lot that Arians was adding that we didn't appreciate in real time. I think that's a really good point. Like, let me hit you with a little bit of math here, though. I'm gonna try to math this up because I pointed out that Nick Sirianni this year, when you look at 4th down decisions, 2-point conversion decisions, avoiding timeouts, and avoiding delay of game penalties. Now, some of it's correlated with who your quarterback is and stuff like that, but for the most part, these are just levers the coach can pull in game. Nick Sirianni's been worth about 2/3 of a win over the average NFL coach. Now, that's a lot. Like, if you think about non-quarterbacks, it's got to be a guy like Aaron Donald. It's got to be a guy like Justin Jefferson. It's got to be Trent Williams in his prime. Those are the only non-quarterbacks that can even touch that win share number during a season, right? So, and that's just on whether or not he's pushing the right levers and that. Like, we both know that there's more that goes into coaching, substitutions, player development, all that stuff. So if you can, let's say, conservatively, the best head coach is worth even more, like 2 or 3 times that much, adding to, just like orders of magnitude. So let's say the best head coach is worth about, 1.25 wins per year reliably, over expected, right? So you grade that out everywhere, right? Over the course of a 5-year contract, given a $208 million salary cap, that number is about $150 million. Like, added in on-field value, right? And it's probably a little bit more, by the way, because our numbers for players, like Tom Brady's adding $50 million on the field last year. He's worth 5 wins above replacement, all that kind of stuff. But it's more than that because the league only can spend $208 per team, right? So, you are uncapped, morally, I guess, with a coach as far as what you want to spend on them. If you take a $10 million salary per year for a coach, which I think it seems kind of whatever, that's $50 million then. So you got $100 million left. $100 million is about what 2 first-round picks end up giving you in value of surplus during the first 5 years of their deal. So what's really cool is your intuition was absolutely correct, right? So you get like 2 first-round picks plus the salary. Those are basically what you end up with a coach. And so I'm sort of thinking to myself, like, if Sean Payton's available, right? Or here's even a bigger thing, and I don't necessarily want to be all that confrontational here, but let's say you're a general manager and a guy like Mike Vrabel, or a coach who I think we've praised a lot on the show. Like, would there ever be a situation where you as a general manager would actively, kind of like the John Gruden thing, actively go after a coach that is employed by another team and go with a trade?
Again, 13 years in, 12 and a half, and being in a little bit of limbo now, obviously a lot of limbo because we don't know if GMs get their opportunities again. Categorically, yes. Hell yes, I would. And again, this is about making sure that you bring the best situation to the team you're going to be working for. And if that means what is, for the betterment of the team, and even though it might not be the happiest place for certain people, and you have to do what's best, I would look at everything. And I have not spent a lot of time looking on that side, only on the opposite end of all this, meaning after I got fired, did I really start considering, the opportunity to look into something like this. And it's a big time move. It takes a lot to consider that. I mean, there are people out there that talk about it within our circles, within general managers and former general managers. And a lot of people are back and forth on it. Yeah, I would do it, but the repercussions it would have on your team, on your players, on your coaching staff moving forward when you're trying. Here's another thing for the listeners. When you're doing something like this as a GM and you think it's all about the betterment of the team, but you don't think of the repercussions about you trying to hire assistant coaches down the road after something like this happens. And they're like, Dimitroff or that GM, he's a pain in the ass. I would never go and work for him because indirectly he did this to our head coach. It's an amazing situation in the league, how much talk there is that way. And you do think that way. You don't want to, cut the bottom out or, blow the bottom out when you know how important it is to make sure that you really look at the repercussions.
Are there second order effects too? Like, if a coach has enough stature to warrant this move, does he have enough stature to challenge the general manager's authority in a lot of cases?
Yes.
Is that a risk that's tough? Because that's kind of where I'm at a little bit too at the quarterback position where, so let's take a step back for a sec. So the reason that Arians is no longer the coach for Tampa is that there was very clearly tension between he and Brady, right? And tension that ended up being creative and won him a Super Bowl, but ultimately that can wear on you, right?
Totally.
That is, if you're a powerful head coach and you bring in a powerful quarterback, then there's tension there and there's an issue. And so that might be why some guys I think of Kyle Shanahan, one of the best, if not the best offensive innovators in the league, but he's always kind of preferred quarterbacks who were driving the car as opposed to quarterbacks who are the whole car, right? And because he's kind of one of the guys there. And Matt Ryan was an exception, but he also was not the head coach when that marriage happened. But when he's been in San Francisco, he's preferred the Kirk Cousins types, the Jimmy Garoppolo types, the Mac Jones, Trey Lance types. And so if you're a general manager, you have to almost be fairly well established to bring in a guy like that because he could kneecap some of your power as an executive if he comes in with that price tag, right?
That's exactly right. Now, look, when I first got into this job, that many years ago, back in 2008, I remember thinking, I really, really wanted the person that I could work with. I wanted the best relationship in the league, GM and head coach, because I really believed you could get a good head coach that had a really good idea of how he was going to run the team along with the general manager, and you were going to work together on everything, right? You weren't going to battle each other. And that was a big, big deal for us. So we did it with Mike Smith and then Dan Quinn as well. Very, very important to have two guys that I could work with. And yet I've had people in my ears over the years who are saying, Thomas, you have to get to a situation where you're comfortable. And if you banter every day, I've even had, and I won't mention the name, a really high respected executive who was convinced you need a contentious relationship with your head coach to ever win a Super Bowl. Vehemently opposed. I think that's completely asinine.